My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, a podcast where I, your host, try to give you some tips on how you can explain all this weird, wild, crazy conspiracy stuff to the people you love most. Because that's what I've been trying to do for the past 10 years with no success.
I've been telling everybody that our government is shady, but every time I do, my family thinks I'm crazy. The hollow earth, UFOs, aliens invading, fluoride in the water, they spray our skies daily. When I talk about these things, they think I'm crazy. There's no escaping anymore the evil that we're facing. Illuminati mind control, they're sacrificing babies. The end of days, but anyways, my family thinks I'm crazy.
What, they don't want to listen to you?
No, they don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it. They're just like, oh, here we go, Mark. Off again with your...
Mark being Mark again.
Yeah. So, that's the thing about podcasts is when you're on the air, and it's like therapy, If I can't talk to my family about this stuff, I'll talk to you, Matt, and all our listeners.
Just tell your whole podcast.
Yeah. So who are we talking about today, Matt?
They think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. My family thinks that I'm crazy.
Just a reset, the body needs rest. A rusty bed set hugging a shoddy mattress. Close your eyes and tuck into your atlas. Sleep, perchance a trance, repose your vision of shut-eye. Cut and dry, all a lie, where you go when you die. It's already here. It's called being alive. Delusion, illusion, and intrusion. Your psyche is immersed in fusion, confusion, without proper preclusion, social seclusion. Portals open, dive in heads first with today's guest Michael Martin, whose dark explorations led him to spiritual freedom. And he joins me, Mystic Mark, here on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast to discuss all this and so much more. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy this conversation with Michael Martin.
What that dream was doing is it was showing you how you can be manipulated and still realize it and not do anything about it. We're on a level of deceit and manipulation that is far beyond most of what we would even conceive. Spiritually, if our consciousness, we had our full memory and everything, it would be nothing. But because we are dumbed down, insulated from our source, and we're in this situation, we can't conceive what's going on because it's beyond our comprehension. Because we're very limited here. The information that we get doesn't teach about the astral, doesn't teach about beyond, doesn't teach about other dimensions. I had to learn it on my own, and there's still so much to learn. But what I have discovered, and most people have heard it many times, but it doesn't do any good to hear it, because you have to realize, you have to understand that we have the ability ourselves, each one of us, not just me, not just somebody else, it's everybody. We have the ability to create universes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are back again on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. And with me today is somebody who's, I'm going to venture to say, far more familiar with the unseen realms than quite possibly the average person, myself included. So I'm very excited to have this gentleman here with us today. Mike Martin joins us. He is the author of My Dark Explorations and the Spiritualist Manifesto, A Guide to Freedom. He also has a channel on Rumble. Mike, welcome to the show, brother. For the audience who isn't familiar with you yet, just give us a quick intro and tell us, what makes you you.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on. The major part of my quest began about 30 years ago Before that, as a child, I had what I didn't know at the time what they were, but they were out of body experiences. And this was back in the 70s, so there wasn't any information and nobody talked about it. But when I was in my 20s, back in the late 80s, I saw this. I was always into reading about the paranormal. And then I saw this Time Life book series advertised on TV called Mysteries of the Unknown. And so I ordered it and get a new book every other month. And it kind of had a leather bound look to the outside. And there were really interesting stories in there. And one of the books was either the first or the second that I got, had out of body experiences in it, astral projection. So as soon as I read that, I was completely intrigued. I didn't correlate those with what I had as a kid because I really didn't, I didn't have much of a memory of it at the time. So it mentioned the book by Robert Monroe called Journeys Out of the Body. So I went and got the book Journeys Out of the Body, and I read through it, and I was amazed. It was like, I got to do this. This is really like great. So I went through the process. I tried a couple of his methods that he had in the book, and they were a little bit different than what I thought was possible for me. So I began to look around, and I'm trying to remember where I got this method from, but it might even been through his book, and it said try through lucid dreaming, which means you realize consciously that you're dreaming, and at that point then you can tell yourself mentally that you want to have an out-of-body experience, and then at that point it's supposed to work. So what I began doing is I began reminding myself many times during the day, since this was before phones. I set my alarm or on my watch, and maybe 15 times during the day it would go off. It would remind me. I would ask myself, am I dreaming? And I would look at an object like a chair or a car or wherever I was at. I would look at the object, turn away real quick, look at it again. And if nothing in that object had changed, then I would know I was not dreaming. And I said, no, I'm not. Because in the dream state, if you look at something, turn away and look at it again, it will have changed, because the dream state is always under a constant change. So I began doing that. Every night I practiced. I woke up in the middle of the night, I'd try again. And at the time, I had been probably keeping a dream log for about 3 or 4 years, because I had got a book on dreaming years before that. And I was trying to kind of track my dreams to see if there was any type of premonition, or I could correlate any of my dreams to my, my life. And so I didn't really find anything, but I was just doing it every night. And if I had 5 dreams, I would wake up and, write all 5 dreams down, or wake up in the middle of the night and write them down. So I was used to waking up and just writing things down, or write down keywords, so that when I woke up the next morning, I would just look at that keyword and go, okay, now I know what the dream was, because it just reminded me. So I'm doing this every day. I'm asking myself constantly. And it took me about 11 months before I was successful at a controlled out-of-body experience. It was in December or late January, and I caught something in the dream. I don't know what it was, but it alerted me that I was dreaming, because it just wasn't right. So I realized I was dreaming. I became lucid, and I told myself in my mind I want to have an out-of-body experience. And at that point, I was whisked out of the dream, and I was probably 10 or 12 feet above ground on the side of my house. And my vehicle, my truck, was parked there, and I was floating above it. It was in December or late November, so it was cold outside. I could tell that it was cold, but I wasn't cold. But I also knew that I was in 2 places simultaneously. I was outside, and I could feel my body back in bed. So that was complete proof, that's what I really wanted to know, that, when I had this. And the other thing that I really noticed immediately was my peripheral vision. Your peripheral vision is almost going to be nearly 360 degrees. So you don't have a body. You can see much more. You feel different, but you are yourself, because you have your consciousness there with you. but in your body in bed, you know it's there, you can feel it, but you can't move it. You have no control of your body at that point because your consciousness has left your body and is now in your astral body, which is on a different realm. So I made note of everything that I could, about what it felt like, anything that I could think of at the time, make a mental note so that when it ended, I could go back and write it all down in my log. It lasted a few minutes. I came back and I was amazed. I wrote down everything, it was everything that I could remember. So I said, okay, now that I'm successful, it should be a lot easier this time. Shouldn't take another 11 months. So I tried every night again, and I tried for a couple months and I was still not successful. And it was a little disheartening, but I just kept trying because I just don't give up. And the very next time was probably maybe almost 4 or 5 months later. I realized that I was dreaming again. Now, what my exercise, because I was still exercising during the day, asking myself 10 or 15 or 20 times a day if I was dreaming. And what that did is it alerted my subconscious to be alert. It didn't know when I was going to ask if I was dreaming. So it was always looking for my conscious mind actually was looking for everything. And it would just basically, it would look for differences or changes without me even noticing. So that's why I realized I was dreaming, because I didn't even catch it. It just all of a sudden I was awake in the dream. I'm lucid. I'm like, okay. And the first thing I want to think was I want to have an out-of-body experience. And I was whisked out of the dream and I'm back in bed on my side, completely awake. The only difference is my eyes are still closed. I move my toes, move my fingers, so I know I wasn't out of body. And I'm like, what's this? And then I started to pay attention, and there was this oval looking image with my eyes closed that had looked like it had been punched through the black background. When you have your eyes closed, there's a black background, and the image had poked through it. And it would look like it was an aerial view of a city or a small town by the water. Now, it was a live view because I could see the water moving and some things moving around in the picture. So it was like a video. And it was at about a 45-degree angle looking down from above. And around the outside of that portal, it was what I call a portal now because that's what it is. I didn't know what it was in the beginning. Around the outside of it was a border. It's same shape as the portal. And it had a bunch of writing in there, as if somebody had written, almost like a postcard where you have a border around it and there's writing. Well, all the writing was completely foreign. Some of it looked more of a hieroglyphic nature. Some of it looked three-dimensional. Some of it looked more like the old style Celtic. It was all mixed together as if, that was some unique, fancy writing style that looked absolutely nothing like anything I've ever seen before. So at that point, I'm just thinking, I don't know what this is, but I have to try to make a mental note of everything so that I can bring this into my journal. I don't have a photographic memory, so there was no way I was going to be able to copy or duplicate any of the writings because it was quite a bit of writing. It was all around the portal. So I just was watching and trying to figure out what it is and how long it was going to last. I just didn't know anything about it. So I'm just like in awe, just watching it and see if there's something going to happen. And then about maybe 50 seconds later, it began to pixelate and then it just disappeared and I opened my eyes. So I wrote in my journal that I called it a viewing because I had no idea what it was. Never happened before. So I assumed it was probably the only time I'd ever see it. So I just wrote everything down. And then that was the first of about 34 years now of these experiences. I've had these starting back there in the early 90s, and I have them to this day. And total count of how many I've had is probably at least 1,000, probably, at least close to 1,000. What happens is at that point, Anytime I became lucid within a dream, conscious, I would immediately be taken out of the dream and back on in bed on my side or whichever way I'm laying, and there would be a portal image. The first couple times they were shaped like a oval portal, and then after that they took my whole peripheral vision. Like when you're in an out of body experience, it's almost 360 degrees. Well, that's how these are. It's the same as my peripheral vision. So I'm viewing them, I would say within a foot of my face, and they're taking up all that space. And I've seen everything from landscapes. I've seen other places. I've seen other beings. I've seen, I believe, at other times. I didn't have any control of where I was going and what I was seeing. I would just be shown. And at times, there were times where it almost looked like I was looking at an overhead projector, and there were papers that had the similar writing that I had seen, and they would show me one image of a written paper, and then it would switch, and they would last about 2 seconds, and they kept moving them over. Like it's information I'm supposed to absorb when I don't even understand the language. Besides that, 2 seconds is not enough to read a whole page's worth of information. And it's been so it always changes. And eventually I put forth another foot and really pushed myself and began to experience them in another form.
Now, this is always occurring after you've left like waking consciousness and you've entered the dream state. You become conscious of the fact that you're dreaming, and then a part of this dream experience or this out-of-body astral experience, and please feel free to correct me because I am using those terms probably a little generally and maybe not as accurately as you would, so feel free to correct me on that. But when you're in that state, is that when you're viewing these full, comprehensive, full... all your vision? What peripheral? Peripheral vision.
Right.
Just off the tip of my tongue. That's happening in a dream state, or can that also happen during your waking consciousness?
Okay, so let me explain it a little bit better, so maybe this way you'll understand a little bit better. So when I can become lucid in a dream, which is conscious in a dream, I'm still in the dream. And then I can make decisions and make changes to that dream at that time. And I've done that many times. If I choose to have an out-of-body experience from that state, I will be whisked out of that dream and taken into an astral area, which the dream has nothing to do with it. I'm out of the dream at that point. With the portals, I'm also whisked out of the dream. But instead of being in the astral, I'm back in bed. So I'm in the complete physical, 100%. Now, when you're astral projecting or out of body, you can't move any parts of your body. Your body is kind of in a paralyzed state because your astral is detached. So your consciousness, while it's in the astral, it can only be in one body at one time. So you have three bodies. You have the physical body, the astral body, which is the spirit, and then you have a soul, which is on the mental plane. If your consciousness resides in any one of those bodies, that's the only one you are active in at that time. So if my consciousness is in the physical body and I can animate my body, that means I'm back in my body. I'm no longer in the astral. So when I realize I'm dreaming, I'm automatically taken out of that dream and I'm seeing portals. At that point, I'm fully in the physical. They're 100% physical because I can move my fingers, move my toes, and I can open my eyes at any time. So this is completely physical. Now, the consciousness has the ability to focus on other things and different perspectives and different perceptions. But what I'm doing is I'm 100% physical. If I wanted to, I could get up and walk around while these were happening. So I'm 100% here. It took me a while to figure out what was really happening or how it was even occurring, because it doesn't mix, or it doesn't make sense when you look at it from previous thoughts about how things work. So they would happen, and I would just write everything down. And it got to the point where I was just in certain circumstances where they didn't really make sense. So I document everything. So sometimes, I would go back in my documentations, like, why did I keep seeing this? It's almost like I was in a front room. And I'm in that same front room. It looked like it was from an elderly person's front room where they had 2 couches and they had a bird or a plant stand that was a black iron plant stand. And the couches were made out of a flowery, light colored material. And sometimes I would see that front room from one angle. And then other times I would kind of see it from a side view. And other times I would see it. And I'm like, why do I keep coming back here? Well, I finally determined that I was seeing through the eyes of somebody else. That's why I'm seeing it from different angles. And so it was most likely a person, an elderly person that lived alone, and I was seeing through their eyes. So I'm like, well, I'm not sure of that, until there were times where I would hop into a crowd, and then I'm seeing through the eyes of someone else because I'm at the same ground level. I'm no longer above looking down. So, and I've also been able to see through people that are deceased. Now that's a little different, but that takes a little while. It's a completely different connection. So let me follow this up with saying that portals are a gateway. They're a direct connection between either myself and someone else, or myself and another place. And when the portals began, it wasn't me initiating them, because over time I've realized and learned that portals require a certain amount of energy from me in order for the connection to remain open. And if my energy levels in my body happen to be a little bit low, then the connection, which means what I visually see, is a lot more pixelated and a lot lower quality. And the amount of time that the portals stay open is a lot less. So one night, if I haven't had an experience in a couple weeks, I have one, it might last a minute, and it might be 4K quality of a view. And if I have one the next night, it might be half of that quality and half of that time. And if I have a third one, then the quality is highly degraded. So somebody had to have initiated them, a third party, in order for these to be so high quality and all these different locales. So I've never known who this is, never had any idea, but I get information, I receive information from this source, but I have absolutely no idea who it is. And I've gone through the process of trying to initiate contact and various things, but I've not been successful on it. So I've gotten to the point where about 12 years ago, I said, there's got to be an alternative way for me to access these portals. And it came in the way of me being on a long commute to work and back. So I had like an hour and a half to 2 hour commute to work, and then about the same coming back every day, 5 days a week. So needless to say, there was a lot of daydreaming going on. And in the midst of driving or sitting there and daydreaming, I realized a couple times that there was something in there that I'm not catching. I'm missing something. So I took a lot of time to investigate this, and I realized that, okay, dreaming and daydreaming, they're very similar when it comes to the brain activity. So we have alpha, beta, theta, different types of brain waves. Well, those brain waves are very similar to dreaming and then daydreaming. They utilize that same concept. So I said, well, if I start to duplicate the brain waves, the concentration level that I'm utilizing in the dream state, then I can do that during the day. So I was able to, because what's happening is when you're daydreaming, your subconsciousness is making connections with other avenues, other places, other realities. And I caught things going on. But as soon as I tried to access that information, as soon as I came out of the daydream, it was like taking a hard drive through a magnetic field. Everything was gone, no information whatsoever. So it took me close to a year to where I could get my consciousness, get into that brain wave activity, get my consciousness to accompany my subconsciousness into that area, which I was already doing. But retrieving that information, that was the hard part. There's a highly insulated veil that separates us between other realities and other dimensions. So I had to get myself accustomed to bringing that information back. So once I was successful in that, then I just kept duplicating that method so that it would be similar to me having lucid dreams, so that I could get used to it. And I could get my body to more, it was more of an automatic type of a thing than having to go through and just push myself constantly. So I was in several of these, I would find myself in conversations with other beings. Now, most of these beings look like us because I believe that they were manipulating their images in order to make me feel comfortable. But I was told through that these are portals. And everybody pretty much utilizes these. The portals are used all over every universe, throughout everywhere. It's like a cell phone. People utilize them like they do video on their phones. But there's a couple of things related to that. But what they said was, this is a portal, but when you see us, we see you. So if I happen to be sitting in a room while I'm having these experiences, they're seeing me in the position that I'm in. It's a full view. And there's an energy transfer between myself and the others on the other side. So we know something about each other just by being in that connection. So a portal is a gateway, and there's no distance or nothing of that nature or space-time. It has no effect on it. It could be between me and someone here on Earth, or someone here in another town, or me and someone in another dimension. Doesn't matter. Distance has absolutely no effect on it. It's a complete opening in space-time. And
can I ask a few questions before we continue? Because I'm absolutely impressed, absolutely stoked that you're here, and very curious to learn as much as I possibly can in the time that we have allotted. So a couple questions. You use the term "they show you," or you're being shown, almost like there's a sort of non-agency to what's going on. And I'm curious, do you think that there is a part of your higher self, right? Because you mentioned the mind, body, soul connection, and how each of the three are kind of maybe separate levels, that your consciousness is either, in one or the other. Sounds like, now I'm kind of adding to my original question, but please answer that question. And then also, it kind of sounds like stuff I've learned about in the remote viewing, when you talk about being kind of still in your physical body, yet also viewing this portal. And correct me if I'm wrong there, because I might have misinterpreted what you were saying.
Let me try to start out with the whole physical body and the spirit body and the soul. Okay, we've got three bodies, and the physical body obviously lives and resides on the physical plane. It vibrates at within that frequency range. The astral body is always on the astral plane because it resides on there. It's got the frequency base of that plane. And then the soul on the mental plane, which is also frequency based. They're all one when we're together. When we're conscious, we're walking around in our body. It's all one piece at that point. They're all connected, and they're always connected because there's a cord in between each one of them. So, but they're all basically working together at that point. And then when we dream, our subconscious usually occupies the spirit body, and unless you're conscious in it, then that's an astral projection. But if you're not conscious within it, you'll you'll experience things and you'll remember them as dreams, and the subconscious is not very good about communicating anything. It's not realistically based. And then so we've got all this, and it's a 3-body system. In my interpretation and the way I see, and from my experiences over these years, is we are the consciousness. We are not the subconsciousness. We are not the physical body. We are not the spirit, and we are not the soul. In reality, that 3-body system, including the subconsciousness, is nothing but a prison. Our consciousness is connected to them only by a means of manipulation. We are there to be manipulated. That's why our memory's wiped. That's why we have a lot of things going on. So there's a whole system within which most of us don't even know that is going on. Like, when I was trying to get into the astral plane, I thought, okay, that's an escape or whatever. But in reality, the physical plane is the prison, and the astral plane is nothing but the prison yard.
Huh. See, now I'm fully understanding, and it seems like you said prism, but I wonder if that is
Prison.
Also true. I get that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I wonder if it's also true that we could say prism too, and we think about it has 4 points and the light is kind of like bent through it and changed. I don't know, maybe a little abstract there, but wow, this really blends well with the conversation that we've had previously on the show with a guest who sort of a favorite of mine recently, and they talk about this prison of the material world and this matrix that we're trapped in. And you're saying that the astral realm is like the prison yard. So with these abilities and this, commitment that you've made, this discipline that you have, right, for not only, exploring this realm, but being conscious of it, right? Having this kind of like determination. This is to the detriment of us being ensnared in this trap. Would you say so?
Yes, and we're all obviously enticed to focus on the physical world while we're here. Everything is based on, drama and politics, and everything that happens in this world is obviously all physically based, and it's money based and everything else. So everybody wants to, be on it, be in it, whatever. And then when people escape to the astral, which is, an astral projection or out of body experience, it takes somebody consciously usually to make that happen. So you got to work hard at it. It's not an easy process. Your astral body goes out and, at night and on its own with the subconscious, and it brings back dreams and all this type of stuff that you see. But when you consciously go there is, people call them spirit guides, and then others, a spirit guide or an angel or devil or whatever, they're all basically the same unit or the same being, but they project themselves in the way that the person would expect. So if you expect to see grandma or whatever, then that's probably what you're going to see. When you're on another playing field, then they can manipulate their image and they can manipulate the landscape. And there are things people talk about, they call them the Akashic records, which is nothing more than a database of everything that we've ever experienced. Everybody's in there, all their information's on there, and all the beings there, they all have access to that database, as if we were plugged into if you were plugged into the internet and you had a question, you just know the answer, or you could see what an animal looks like, and what their traits are, and you've seen videos, and almost like you can experience what the animal is experienced. Well, they have that same type of information. So when you show up there, they know that you've never been there or that you're a newbie, and they're going to immediately tell you what you want to hear, and they're going to look like what you want to see, and they're going to give you that experience, because it's like you've escaped the earthly world, and it's their job to perform damage control, to keep you along the same agenda that we have here on Earth. They might allow you a little bit more space and freedom, but it's nothing more than deceit in order to keep you under their wing and following what they are going to tell you. So they'll continue to feed you information, and you're not going to question it. But the thing is, I mean, you would question somebody on the street who started giving you information. Why wouldn't you question those people? I tell everybody, you don't believe me, that's fine. But question everything. Question every single thing. And I back up my information with experience and explorations. I do this stuff personally, and I've been documenting this stuff for years. And sometimes I don't have answers, but if I have questions myself, then I go through my documentation and my experiences, and I make a determination based upon what I've experienced and how things have been going. So I don't make decisions lightly. I have to base it upon some kind of support.
Well, I don't get the sense from you that I should be skeptical, because this all really, as I was saying before, it kind of melds together neatly with some other things that I've heard, and I think you probably gathered that, considering you reached out to me, you listen to the show. So yeah, this is right on track with a lot of the things that I've been thinking about. Now, I want to ask you maybe like just two kind of specific questions about the portals, and then please, continue on the journey, because I don't want to go on too many tangents. But when you're viewing the portal, because you described like daydreaming and driving and sensing that these were floating around in your mind, you might not have like consciously grasped them right away, but it kind of dawned on you. You're saying that, oh wow, this is happening while I'm daydreaming. So what, help the people visualize? Is this more like a slideshow where like what you're actually seeing in front of you with your physical eyes is replaced, or is it more like, two monitors, like where you're still seeing the road, but like kind of floating above that in your mind's eye is this portal?
Okay, I'll address the glimpses. I call them glimpses because that's what I access in the daydream state. So what happened is, once I discovered these, I couldn't do it. I could no longer do it while I was driving, because it was just it's completely different. But so what happens is, I'm driving and I might lose what I would call consciousness in watching the road for a snap. It might be half second. And then I realized there was a conversation going on, me and someone else. Now, let me give you an example of the first one that I remember. I remember sitting at a table. I was physically sitting at a table. My view was from sitting at a table with another man in a village. And that man was talking to me as if we knew each other well. And I was just listening, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And that's what it was. And now I don't know what the conversation was. I had no idea I'm like, what is that? I'm not asleep. I was completely like wide awake. So I started sitting in a room, and I would start by staring at a wall, trying to get the connection I have that I've been used to, the same type of brain level that I was having when I was laying in bed after a dream. I said, I'm going to be able to duplicate it, because I know what it feels like and I know what I need to do. So it took me a while to figure out how to get my mind into that state. And what happens is, when you're in a daydream or when you're in a dream, it's easy for that state to take you away. You'll just drift off, and next thing you know, you'll wake up and you're like, I don't know what's going on. So what I had to do is I had to find a way to bring my consciousness, my awakened consciousness, with me through that transition. And there's a transition there when there's a millisecond from the time that you're conscious, your eyes will close, and then you're there. Now, at that point, you're either fully awake or you're in a subconscious state. So what I did was I finally got to myself to where I could train my consciousness to be there, because it's easy to drift, let your subconscious take over and drift into something. Once I was able to take my consciousness there, that's when I realized what was going on. I realized that I'm in different places. I'm in different locales. I'm in different dimensions. And people would talk, beings. Now, when I say beings, they could be, some are just have these weird looking body parts connected, and they're not changing their image for me. And most of them will change their image to look human-like, so that I'll communicate with them. So they would start showing up and they would talk to me. They would give me information. Most of it was just kind of generalized, but I would be physically there as if I was, there. And that's when I happened to end up at the end of this cave. I'm looking in this cave. It's a long, straight cave. It was kind of lit with torches. And there's someone on the other end with a cape on, and they had a hood on. Couldn't see their face. And the first thing, the male voice, and now this is all telepathy. There's no physical voices or anything like that going on. It's all telepathy, because as soon as you're there, it starts. The information exchange is constant. So I'm there, and he says, "You realize that this is a portal," because that was my first question. So this is a portal, and you realize what you see on this side, we see on the other side. So we both get to view each other the same. So if I get to see something that's maybe 25 or 30 foot wide, then they're seeing that much on my end. So, I go through situations where I'll just show up and there's a conversation going on. I happen to be sitting at a table or standing somewhere. And I quickly realized that this is not unique. The only difference is this is happening to people on a daily basis. Everybody. When your mind wanders or you have a daydream, your subconscious is connecting with other places. Now, we might have some type of a connection with these places, or I'm not sure. I haven't discovered that. But we're getting information. And we don't realize that because consciously we're not there. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to be able to catch it. And then I knew a way that I could try in order to, bring my whole self there and duplicate the whole process to get myself to know what's going on and bring it back.
Right.
Now it's not like a dream state, because I'm utilizing that connection, but I'm not in a dream, because I can ask questions and I can do all sorts of things, and I can actually somewhat change the landscape, because they have the ability to manipulate their landscape and their image because it's on their turf. No different than maybe, here you could put a wig on and put makeup on, or, put a disguise on. They have that same ability, but this is on a different level because it's not a physical plane. So there's so much to answer on that. And when you ask about portals also, the portals are a connection that we all use. Whether we realize it or not, it is happening. We are spiritual beings trapped in a physical body.
Right.
So we have that ability. Most people just haven't discovered it. Almost all people probably haven't.
It sounds to me like how the connection is established, the origin of these places and why you're drawn to connect with them, maybe, a little undiscernible just due to the nature of it. But I wonder, like, to your point, it sounds to me like, we're kind of like, to give it a physical world example, we're kind of driving around with like a CV radio and, waiting to pick up these signals or so on. Like our subconsciousness is always kind of just like searching for other subconsciousnesses to connect with in a sense. And maybe not just the subconscious, but the entire, being.
Yeah, and the subconsciousness, everybody says that it's part of us, but I refer to the subconsciousness as the hive mind. Because if you listen to a lot of people, they'll say that, I mean, a lot of people that do past life therapy and that sort of thing, the information that they receive is going to be through the subconscious, and it follows the same agenda as the beings on the astral and the other planes beyond, because it's not a part of us, just like our bodies aren't a part of us. Our consciousness is the only part of us that is actually us. So when I go to these places, my intent is I go there, I don't make any determinations, I don't judge anything. I merely pull the information back with me, I write it all down, and then later on down the line, then I will make a decision based upon that of how my experiences of, how I've experienced this and how the things have worked. Mm-hmm. So what I've determined was, no matter where you're at, every being has their own agenda. Okay. So that you have to realize that just because they're from somewhere else or they could be a spiritual being doesn't mean that they necessarily are looking out for your best interest.
Right.
Most likely they're looking out for their own best interest. So when I document my information, it's always based upon just generalization, so that I know that until I've been there enough times or been around enough times, I can't make a determination about how things really are until I've had enough experience in it. Right. I'm a technical type person. I need to know how things work, why they are that way, and understand the environment and understand the reasoning behind it.
Well, it seems like that's aided you in being able to stick with this, which seems like a sort of, well, no pun intended, but like a dreamy sort of thing where, maybe it's more people who are more artistically inclined, are kind of in touch with this, but they might not be the most disciplined people to take on the task of really exploring and coming back with the full comprehensive experience in mind, or as much as you can. But I imagine this other realm, this prison yard and whatever's beyond it, must sort of reflect our ecosystem in some way, right? And the same is true when we go out into the world. Not everybody we meet has our best interests in mind. Not every creature that we interact with has our best interests in mind. A tiger is a beautiful creature, but you don't want to be, playing with it in its natural habitat because you're on the menu, right? I mean, there's a certain thought there, maybe a little Darwinian. I don't mean to go down that route, but it is a sort of, thought to be had that we're more than just these physical beings. We have a body that extends into these other realms, these other dimensions with their own ecosystem. So, I'm sure there's a sort of similar balance of things in those places too.
One thing that I will say about other places, and a couple of years ago, it really started to come in heavy, where I was being shown more things of nature, of like two-dimensional worlds, or worlds that didn't have either a physically looking beings or beings that you could communicate. My first experience with the two-dimensional world was about maybe 15 years ago. It was a nightly portal, and I was shown this world, and it was black background. It had these black mountains with just a tinge of white, and the mountains were very sharp. They look like mountains. That's what when I say they were mountains, I'm going to tell you what they look like to me, because I can only tell you based upon my own experiences. And so it was black and white only, and these creatures were on there, and everything in this land or this place had sharp features. So that mountains were sharp, the birds had sharp, I would call them birds because they look more like that than anything else. And then everything was black and white, and you could tell the difference between the beings in the mountains because there was a tinge of a different color in between them. So it was almost like a shadow, but it was completely flat, two-dimensional. When I first saw it, I thought it was a drawing or some kind of artwork or something until they moved. And then I'm like, whoa, okay. But then I realized this was the first connection or gateway that I had, a portal, that I had to rely solely on communication, the energy flow between the two places, myself and those beings. I could read the fact that they could be dangerous, but I read the fact that they were very docile at that time. They watched me and I watched them. Now, when I say I was seeing this, imagine yourself, probably your face is inches away from this. So I didn't feel like I was viewing it from a TV. I felt like my face was physically right there. Now, when I'm in the nightly portal thing, I'm 100% awake. I can move my fingers and move my arms and everything else. So if you imagine you're somewhere and your face is right there and you just like, I didn't feel intimidated and I didn't feel threatened, but I did feel it won. And I'm like, I'm in a situation so foreign that I couldn't even imagine it from my normal life. And face to face with these beings in a place that I could never imagine. And we're completely harmonious at that point. You know, we just kind of melded and watched each other, learned what we could, and then the connection was severed. But since that time, in the past couple of years, I've seen more of the two-dimensional type of places. Now, when I say two-dimensional, that was two-dimensional. These other ones are almost like seeing what some people would say, like if you doodle on a piece of paper in a black pen, you know, it's just kind of just haphazard drawings or whatever. Well, I started seeing these things at almost like grapevines at night or whatever, but it was a gray background. And then they started moving around, they'd separate, and it almost reminded me of hive of bees or ants. They would move around, but then once they realized I was there, they couldn't see me because they don't have eyes or anything. I'm sure they have senses, but then they will kind of come around me. But it wasn't like they were three-dimensionally coming towards me. They would just move in my direction based upon my location in their place. And, you know, we would just kind of sense each other. And then they would eventually go back to what they were doing. But you could tell there was a knowing of something foreign was there. Wasn't any attack or anything, but it was just very, you know, understanding. And so when things like that happen, you just have to really sit down and think, wow, I mean, if we can meet things of that nature that are just so foreign from us and things can be peaceful, then, you know, here we are in our situation and it's just, you know, a crap storm. So
Yeah. Oh, please. Yeah, no, I think we're definitely in a situation that we're in because we've, I don't know, for however long we have kind of ignored or left these abilities that we might have undervalued and underappreciated. You know, that I, as a frequent cannabis smoker, at least according to the science, I use a lot of my melatonin during the day. So maybe I daydream more than I consciously am aware of my dreams. I'm sure I'm still dreaming. It's just due to, I guess, smoking pot. I don't really remember a lot of my dreams. Maybe towards the later half of my sleep, like right when I'm about to wake up, and I guess maybe the THC from the night before has kind of left my system. That's when I'll have some memorable dreams. But it is something that I do feel like a yearning for, and almost like I'm missing that in my life because of my cannabis habit. But when it comes to like this, the visual aspects of this, that was very much a part of how you began to dive into this world, right? Because you started to train yourself verbally and visually to be like, am I dreaming right now, right? This was a part of what helped you become conscious and aware during that dreaming state, which again, back to the comprehensive view of things, is only the prison yard, right? So I have a few different questions. I want to go in a few different directions, but I think I'll stay in the forward direction rather than backtracking and just ask you, like, so where do we, how do we get out of that prison yard? And do you think that you've experienced that in these journeys that you've gone on? It maybe like through these portals, can they take you beyond that astral plane?
Yeah, I'm sure they can. But see, the problem is here, we're, here on Earth or here in our system, whether it be, I also want to say the astral plane is just a plane that's just one dimension or one plane over the Earth. So you could actually be on the astral plane and it looks the same as what it looks like right now. There's other things that you would know that you're on the astral, but what I'm saying is it's just an overlay of physical Earth, and then the mental plane's over that. But so we are somehow, and I have to figure out the whole process. That's my goal right now, is to find a way to free, and I've already began the process to free us from our binds. So what is happening is our consciousness, which I believe is the true self of the one that is us, is the energy source and everything about us. And we're bound somehow to the subconsciousness, the physical body, the astral body, and the soul. Somehow we are connected to it, and we can't get it out of it. Now, I can free myself at certain points to get away from it, but eventually you still have to come back. I mean, you're physically alive, so you have to, it's connected. So my whole process of this is, the beginning is to free yourself from the game. Now, when I say it's the game, it's the physical life, drama, programming, and that sort of thing. And the only way that you can do that is you have to distance yourself from from news and a lot of the media when it comes down to the daily news, because it's like a drug and it's like a spell. Now we're being and I call it psycho-illogically programmed. It's a 24/7 aspect. When you go to sleep and you're not consciously aware of your dreams, things are happening to you and you're being programmed. The same thing as when you're watching TV, and a lot of times you're on the internet, you're being programmed. And you've been programmed your whole entire life. The only way that you can do it is to step back from a lot of that input and allow yourself to begin thinking and begin becoming consciously aware of everything. So you have to be in charge of your feelings. You have to be in control of your thoughts. You have to be in control of your emotions. And let me give you an example. So, you're at work and somebody says something to you and it just immediately sets you off. Okay. What is happening there is that you're allowing someone else to control you. They're controlling your emotions or they're controlling your feelings. Just by saying something, they have connected with you and began control. And you don't want other people or other circumstances to become in control of you, because that means you are not in control. If you're going to be independent, which you need to be, then you need to be in control of your faculties. Because what happens is we're all energy type beings. We all emit some form of energy. And when we're depressed and when we're low and feeling bad and mad and hateful, we are generating low vibrational frequencies. And that's what's obviously being desired. Otherwise, our society wouldn't be in the place that it's at right now. I don't ever get into what's happening because everybody already knows. I don't need to mock the media and tell everybody what's happening. That's not my job. My job is to tell you how to separate from it and how to get yourself out of here. So I began the first book, The Spiritualist Manifesto, to lay people out how to disconnect themselves from what's going on. You need to be able to realize what is really happening. And this is a multi-layered, multi-leveled system of deceit. and manipulation. And I have found a lot of it. I've discovered a lot of it. And even though I know it's going on, the system is so determined because it learns from us, because we're all feeding into that database. So as we're feeding our information into it, it's absorbing it and saying, okay, well, we're going to counteract that. So we're climbing up out of a hole that somebody's watering constantly, and it's falling, it's slippery, and we're having a hard time getting out. So we have to learn as we go along. So as I get information and discover information and things, I write it down and then I release it so people can benefit from it. You know, I have that Rumble channel that I use, My Dark Explorations. I put videos on there to try to help people. And until you realize what being awake really is and conscious of yourself and of your feelings and of your thoughts and of your emotions, you have to be in control. That's the number one thing. And let me give you an example of this too, to show you how easily you can be manipulated and know about it. So you could be in a dream and maybe there's somebody you really don't like. I mean, you might just hate them and you would never allow them in your house, but you have a dream and that person comes to your house and is in your house. And you know, in the dream, it's like, you know, I don't even know why this person's in here because I really don't like them. I really don't like them. And the whole time you're telling yourself that. And you wake up in the morning, you're like, you know what? I don't know why I would ever let that person. Now, what that is that's a perfect example of how you can be manipulated and not do a darn thing about it. And people are like that on the physical as well, because what that dream was doing is it was showing you how you can be manipulated and still realize it and not do anything about it. We're on a level of deceit and manipulation that is far beyond most of what we would even conceive. Spiritually, if our consciousness, we had our full memory and everything, it would be nothing. But because we are dumbed down, insulated from our source, and we're in this situation, we can't conceive what's going on because it's beyond our comprehension, because we're very limited here. The information that we get doesn't teach about the astral, doesn't teach about beyond, doesn't teach about other dimensions. I had to learn it on my own, and there's still so much to learn. But what I have discovered, and most people have heard it many times, but it doesn't do any good to hear it. Because you have to realize, you have to understand that we have the ability ourselves, each one of us, not just me, not just somebody else, it's everybody. We have the ability to create universes. We really do have the ability to do it. If I can open portals myself and I can do it at will, you can do it. You have that ability. You have an abilities you can't even, if you knew 1% of your abilities, you would be completely amazed. But we have this. Ether is the basis of the astral plane, and it also is the basis for a lot of the solid objects that we see here on Earth. We have the ability to manipulate ether. And that's why when they say, oh, your thoughts are creations and all that, yeah, it is. But you don't know, you don't have the tools to understand how to use them. And it's not a knowing. It's not like, okay, well, I can teach you how to be spiritual. You can't. Spirituality has to be experienced. And so do these things that happen. The reason I believe that I'm not in connection with anybody, nobody's speaking to me, nobody's telling me how to do things. They figure, well, if I show him enough portals and he understands how the thought process works and everything, he'll figure it out. He'll figure it out on his own. And that's better than teaching somebody something. Because if I take you on a job and I was a bricklayer and you were laying bricks with me 8 hours a day for months and months, you'd end up being a pretty good bricklayer if you really cared. But if I set you in a desk every day and said, well, this is how you do this, is how you do this, you probably wouldn't be a very good bricklayer. Sometimes you need to learn on your own. They're going to show you They're going to you're going to apply yourself. They're going to put you in situations where you're going to experience it. And then at some point, you're going to have to catch on and take over for yourself. And that's what people are going to need to do. They're going to need to take it seriously. And they're going to need to dig deep. And if you want to know about frustration, I can tell you frustration on about 1,000 scale. Because when you don't understand and nobody gives you information and you have questions and you have no one to ask, that's the frustration level I've been at. And yeah, it happens, but you have to have the drive. You have to apply yourself and say, I don't really care what happens. I'm going to figure it out. I'm just, no matter how long it takes, I'm just going to figure it out. Because nobody told me and nobody showed me how to do anything. I had to figure it out for myself. And if you have the drive and you really want to learn, then you will learn. You will learn and you will experience. And you will come to conclusions and you will know truth for yourself. And that's the only way you're going to find it.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, that rings true with my experience. I can't say I follow that as closely as I'd like, but you're definitely impressive, Mike. It's something that I'm almost flabbergasted at how this is kind of coming in. The information is coming into a place in me that just is like it fits. It's cohesive to what I've understood, even though I've never really, I can't say I've experienced any of what you're describing. Somehow it does feel true. And I'm curious, when it comes to these sort of, obstacles in our way, aside from maybe the obvious things, like, do you have a particular diet? Is there something that is the foundation behind all this, aside from the being independent and having the dedication to it?
At first, when these were happening, and I was younger and I had a new family and I had kids and everything, and I didn't have anybody to talk to about it or anything, and they were happening, and I'm like, well, this is cool, but I'll just continue to write everything down. And I gave it a back seat. I had a new career, a family, like I said, and everything. And, you have to go to work every day, and there was no time to just sit around. I just went on with life for years until, I only talked about it for just a couple very close people that I knew of, and they really didn't have much of an interest in it. And so I figured, okay, well, maybe people just don't really care. That's fine. I'll continue on with the process. And then about a couple of years ago, I decided, you know what? There's no good for me to just keep this information to myself, because, if I pass and nobody else has it, what good is it? It's nobody's here to go on with it. So I just sat down. I said, well, I'm just going to start getting serious with it. So I started, putting my information together, all my documentation. I started writing on it. It was a very slow process, and information started coming to me, and I would just write more down. And finally, I just came out with the one book, My Dark Explorations. I came out with it last year. And I said, okay, I'm going to put it to paper. And then I did a few podcasts and bring information out. And I know the situation in our world right now really is really more important than, my experiences. So I said, well, I'm going to get to the point where I can basically take my experiences and all what I've had and put it forth towards what would help people in general. And so that's why I wrote the Spiritualist Manifesto, because, it's, saving our independence and our freedoms is more important than anything at this point, because, the attacks on ourselves, it's on everybody. It's not just on, one country or another. It's a unified attack on everything.
Yeah.
So I decided, I said, I knew as a kid there was something wrong here. I just knew things weren't right. I always knew that. That's why I kind of, delved into the field, metaphysical, and, in the 80s and 90s, I went through it. And I quickly realized, once I started having these experiences, that a lot of the information was just not right. The information was not that it wasn't right. It was deceit, flat out, whether it was to sell books or just to sell people. And I didn't agree with that. I just, at one point in the early 90s, I stopped reading anything. I just said I wasn't going to do it, because that information is just completely wrong. And I think it was there for a purpose. It was a reason. You get somebody that could potentially plan a way out. You definitely want to thwart that. So you're just going to start putting out other information that would just throw people off their path, and they're going to go for it, and they're just going to waste a bunch of time and not go anywhere. And that's what I found is rampant in the field of metaphysical and parapsychology type of thing. It's the information is just wrong. And so that's why I decided to write this and go on some of the podcasts, because, if I see something that's, I'm going to call it out, because, the last thing people need to do is to try to find a way out, or, try to get in touch with themselves and be fed a bunch of junk that's not going to help them. It's going to throw them off on another tangent.
Well, and it feels like you're giving people the tools to wake up in a way that reveals what's really keeping us ensnared here, because, a lot of us listening to these shows, like, yeah, we're aware that 9/11 was an inside job. We say things like, we never went to the moon, and, we acknowledge all these lies. They killed JFK and they lied about it, right? But do any of us do anything to, and I don't want to sound like a total cynic here, because there's plenty of activists and authors who are doing something about it, but it feels like the real crux of the issue lies in these other dimensions, not in this physical one. So I'm interested in learning more about, what went into, the process and how to deal with it. That's why I asked about, diet. Like, is this something anyone can do, or is this because
sorry, I didn't
it's
get
all right.
that, but no, I really didn't. I never did any specific diet. I tried that, and it didn't affect anything. I mean, I've done a lot of things. Like I said, I didn't address it for years, and I would always get this type of thing where I would get this energy rush that would just kind of try to push me back into it. It was a reminder. I was getting reminders a lot in the past 10 years. But no, I didn't follow any diet. I did try some things one time, and it didn't have any effect. And, it just, nothing seemed to change it. It was a constant that remained there no matter what happened to me. I went through some illnesses and that sort of thing. It was just steadfast. It just kept happening on its same timeline. It just, nothing changed it. So it wasn't anything that I had to do. I think it was the fact that I began the process of the lucid dreaming and the astral. And once I began that and consciously put in the time, that's when it took off. It wasn't anywhere that I had planned on going. I didn't know anything about portals other than what I saw on Star Trek or whatever, but I never focused. I never even thought about it. Nobody ever talked about portals other than, this physicist in the wormholes and stuff. But I never had any specific interest in it. That wasn't my forte. So no, I didn't. Nothing I did seemed to change anything, other than the fact that I think my constant focus on whether am I conscious or not, am I awake or not, blah, blah, blah type of thing, that's what set the stage for it. That's what started the chain reaction that brought me to this place right now. And so I've really gotten real diligent on trying to keep that going, because it's so easy to fall back into, your normal daily life where you do this and you do that and you forget about everything else. And, but I have to remain diligent on it, because if I don't, then nothing gets done. And in my personal opinion, I have to find a solution. I troubleshoot things, and I need to know how they work, like I said. So I have to find a solution for this, and I'm going to find a solution for it, because it's so, our situation and our surrounding landscapes are so multi-level, manipulative, and it is so hard to get a grasp on it, because it's so illusional. Yeah, your thoughts can affect it, and other things affect it as well. But once you remain independent, and once you remain conscious, you get a better understanding and an awareness that you don't get when you fall back into the realm of daily life, your daily routine, and that sort of thing. And one thing I wanted to say about, you said you don't remember your dreams. If you want to remember your dreams before you go to bed, you tell yourself you want to remember your dreams. And if you wake up after a dream, write it down, or write your keywords down. Make sure you're diligent about it, and then you will begin to remember them. And it'll be to the point where you can have 5 dreams in one night, and you wake up in the morning and just write them all down, because your memory will get that good. But you have to be diligent about it, and you have to be consciously, it's like, stay on yourself, stay on it. Don't let it up, because if you do it for a couple of days and you're like, I'm too tired tonight, and you don't forget about it, the next thing you know, you're back into the same routine of not doing it. If you're going to do something, then you have to put both feet in, and you have to put some effort into it, because it's like a mental muscle. You have to really push on it, because we've become so complacent that we just, we're lazy. We get lazy. We'd rather have people take care of stuff for us. That's why we're in our certain situation right now. We don't want to stand up and make a big deal about it. That's why we're in this current situation right now. There's so many things that we've just allowed to happen, or we just didn't want to look at it because it wasn't convenient for us. We want convenience. And so we've given up our freedoms for security, for false security and that sort of thing. So we have to blame ourselves, but we also have to realize that if we want out of this situation, we have to do it for ourselves. If you want to look for a hero, then look in the mirror. Be your own hero. Be your own guide. Be your own God. Be your own everything, because we are the answer to our problems. Whether it be standing up, whether, you stand up for your family, you stand up for your friends, you stand up for yourself. If somebody comes to you and says something, we all have a moral compass. And I think a strong moral compass is the most important thing that we can have. For myself, people said, oh, don't you worry about, devils, and never once have I ever been concerned. I've never been, and you can't show fear to anything. Don't acquiesce to any of your freedoms or your emotions to anybody else. Be in control. When I'm in these other places, the last thing that I would even think about would be safety. It's never once entered my mind. I've never felt threatened. I've never felt that. And I'm not afraid to go into something. I'm not afraid to jump in with both feet.
No.
Have
you always been like this, or
what's that?
Have you always been like this, or is this a sort of byproduct of having these experiences? Because it does sound like you want everyone to partake in this, and I wonder, if this has improved your life, what do you think the world would look like if everyone was conscious of this ability, or conscious of our access to these other places, for lack of a better term, instead of in this state of amnesia that most of us are in?
I think it's not that just I want everybody to experience these. I want everybody to experience their reality, the current reality of our situation, and understand their ability. Not everybody is going to go and have portals. Not everybody's going to have astral projection. I was on a path. I set myself on a path towards astral projection. That was my initiation. But I didn't end up there. That wasn't my focal point. What happened is I started on this path, and then this other door opened up. And at first I thought, well, it's just, who knows? It's going to be a one-time thing. And I started happening more and more. Then I said, okay, I'm going to go with this. And I just moved on. Now, my path is not really leading to, what anywhere near what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be just more of a personal, a growth thing. It's not what it did. Sometimes you need to look at it from the broad spectrum. I had to stop looking at it from the 10-foot level and go to the 10,000 or 2-mile level and look at it from there. And I thought, how can this benefit other people? How can this benefit everybody? It's not just about me. And when everybody says, hey, we're all one. No, we're not all one. We're all a bunch of individuals. Yes, we are individuals. We're not one hive mind. We're not from one hive mind. We're all individuals, and that's how we should remain. We need to have our own freedoms and our own, everybody should be free to do exactly what they want to do as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of others. That's how it always should have been. But we are all individuals. We're individuals for a purpose and a reason. So we need to individually look at things. And, if you can utilize some of the information that I have, great, use it, have at it, but we all have to individually experience things, but we all have to also understand that where we're at and where we're currently at is not where we want to be. And the only way that we're going to get ourselves out and away from this is by standing up and taking a conscious look at our situation. Question everyone and everything. Don't believe politicians. Don't believe these world leaders. Don't believe these corporations. You have your own moral compass and follow that. And if anybody tries to get you to do anything out of that doesn't agree with your moral compass, then that's when you need to stand up and say, this is not going to happen. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for your beliefs. You know what's right and wrong. Don't do something wrong just because somebody else tells you. There is no such thing as authority. Authority doesn't happen. You are the individual who's responsible for yourself and for your family. And if standing up for yourself and for your family isn't enough, then I don't know what to tell you. You know what's wrong and right. I don't need to tell you what's wrong or right. But I do need to tell you that sometimes that you need to stand up for what you know is wrong and what is right. And don't do things that other people tell you to that you know is not right. It doesn't follow your moral compass. Because that's you.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% all the way on all of that. But I'm curious, because it sounds to me like freedom is, an instrumental value of yours. I share that. I have no qualms with that whatsoever. But I do wonder, are you carved from this cloth, so to speak, and that's why you're predisposed to maybe have more of a knack for seeing these portals and entering this other realm? Or are you saying that when more people, when you live your life that way, this is sort of something you can access, or having this access maybe even instills that sense of individuality and freedom in somebody? That it sounds like that's the change you'd like to see in the world, in other words.
Well, I really don't have answers for every question, and I can't say that I'm any different from anybody else. I mean, we are all individuals, but we have the same capacity and we have the same abilities and we have the same, you can take any path you choose. This just happened to be the path that laid itself out in front of me. Somehow I got started on it. I wasn't, like I said, it wasn't my intention. Everybody has intentions, and you might want something and it doesn't work out, but another avenue opens up for you, and it works that way. I believe that the intention for myself at this point was, to allow people to see that there is something out there that they're not being told about, and they have the capacity for something that is much beyond their even understanding.
Right.
So my message would be, yeah, I have the ability to do this, but so do you. But you have abilities that nobody understands and nobody knows about.
Right.
So you need to be look within, not without. Don't listen to other people tell you what you should be doing. You need to listen to yourself and find out what your capacity is. You know, you are the only one that's going to be able to understand what you're capable of. But unless you apply yourself, you will never know. And the only difference between me and anybody else in this respect is that I applied myself. I didn't look at limitations, because if I would have accepted limitations, or if I would have accepted fear, or if I would have accepted doubt, I would have never gotten to this point. I don't think about things. When I did it, I just did it. I didn't think about well, maybe I should do this. I didn't question myself. I didn't question anything. What I did find out, though, as I got into this, there was things that I decided I wasn't going to do because it didn't fit what I was doing. When I first started doing these glimpses and then making these connections, and I was told that these were also portals, there were other beings that came to me, and they said, "Hey, we got an idea. We can show you how to keep these portals open." Well, immediately I knew this wasn't right. It was a red flag. Immediately I knew that. I wasn't going even to question it. I wrote it all down, what they said and everything, and I looked at it and I said, no, I would never even consider it, because why would somebody want to leave these portals open? It would be for their own benefit, and it would be to not my benefit. You know, I mean, so there was things that were said and were told to me that I knew immediately that I wasn't willing to do. You know, so when you hear something that you don't agree with, then you just chalk it up to something you don't agree with. And eventually they stopped asking me. They stopped mentioning it to me because they knew I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't in for it.
Right. Now,
because it wasn't in my best interest. So, and it wasn't in the best interest of everybody else. I don't know why they wanted to leave them open. And if I would have asked, they probably wouldn't have told me the truth. So I just left it at that. But there are going to be times where you're going to be tested, whether it was meant as a test or not. I don't think these were a test. They were just going to, do what they were going to do. But you have to know the difference between saying no or blowing it off or just letting it go, because it's not in your best interest. And you'll know when there's something wrong. But like I said, you have to question everything.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this so much. It's starting to sort of click to me, and I appreciate that, one of your books seems to me to be like kind of like a catalog of what you've experienced, whereas the Spiritualist Manifesto, A Guide to Freedom, is like, your sort of how to navigate this realm and also prevent yourself from what sounds like being exploited by these beings, maybe not at the depth that you were exploited because you were, opening portals. Maybe they wanted you to keep those portals open. Who knows? Answer this, if you will. Do you think that that's kind of maybe like a parasitic agenda of some of these beings to like maybe unwittingly use others, people like us, maybe unwittingly navigating this realm as a portal, and that would be to our detriment especially if we're unaware of it, I imagine.
Right. If I figured, why would they need me to keep this portal open if they could just do it themselves? Obviously, they didn't have the ability. And I do believe with these portals, and I don't know if it's universal when I say universal everywhere, but there is some type of, I would say there's some type of oversight in a way. So, and maybe that's why they couldn't utilize them, or maybe they didn't have the ability to do it. Now, I'm sure there are places that utilize portals with some type of a technology or whatever. Now, there are other spiritual beings out there, and there are, beings that rely on technology. And I've seen other beings that were spiritual in nature, but they utilized physical icons to have rituals and different types of thing, like maybe a church type service or whatever. I don't know what they utilized them for, but I have seen it happen before.
And have you recorded these physical icons? Like, are these kind of like just like symbols or sigils that you could like recreate on paper?
Oh yeah, I have. I recreated them on paper. And I'll tell you what. One set of them looked like. There was 8 of them. And you know what an oxygen, one of those steel oxygen bottles with the dome top look like, that they have the gauge on top?
Yeah.
Okay. If you were to make that painted glossy black and it was smooth on top, I mean, it was just still cylindrical looking. It was a 4-foot type thing, and it was glossy black, and there was a black glossy bowling ball sitting on top of it. Now, it was all one piece. And they had different types of like images on the side or colors on the side, almost like lightning bolt looking things that designated 4 from the other 4. So almost like male or female or different types of, hierarchy. So they were moving those around in a wooden area that looked like almost like a Catholic church with the stage, like an old Catholic church with all wood on the inside with the flying buttresses and everything. I was seeing that from above, and they were moving those images, those icons around, or avatars around, as if they were sitting on ice, just sliding them around, and it was some type of a ceremony.
Well said. Well said. I think that's a good place to wrap up. My Dark Explorations is his Rumble channel, The Spiritual Manifesto, A Guide to Freedom, and a book by the same name, My Dark Explorations, are both available on Amazon. You can find the links to all that in the description. Mike, this has been extremely interesting. I'm very curious to see these portals myself, I'll say. So I need to start reading your book right away. I imagine the Spiritualist Manifesto, A Guide to Freedom would be a good place to start for myself and others like me who want more of a how-to sort of, and maybe some advice for what to do once you're there.
Well, and with my Rumble channel, the good thing about it is you can leave a comment, and then in the about section, I have an email. I'm always available to answer people's questions, because there's nothing worse than to have somebody try to show you something or teach you something or help you with something that's not available. So I'm available. So if you have a real legitimate question, ask me. I'll answer it. I'm not going to ignore people. I mean, I don't put information out there in order to hide it. If I'm not clarifying something, let me know. Feedback is the only way that I know what I can cover that people may have questions on. Otherwise, I don't know, because we have different perspectives. My perspective is one way and your perspective is another way. It doesn't mean that I'm any better than anybody else is. It's just that I've been exposed to things that allow me to see things that other people may not have. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. And that doesn't mean you don't have your own perspective to see things that nobody else can.
I agree. Yeah, well said. Well, Mike, I hope people check out your Rumble channel and your books as well. Is there anything else you have to promote or share with the audience before we come to a close here?
Yeah, I'm not the type of person to be putting out books and then go on podcasts, put on books. That's not my intention. I'm just here to help people, and I want to get people the information. I want to get it out there, and then let people do with it as they will. If you want to use it, fine. If you don't, fine. But my intention and my end game is make all the information available, get it out there for people, and then hopefully they'll utilize it. Because, if we don't, like I said, we don't stand up for ourselves, then there won't be anything to stand up for anymore.
I agree with you. Yeah, no, I think it's the time to do that. And I hope this episode inspires the folks tuning in. Thank you so much for being here, audience. And Mike, thank you so much for spending the time with me here, 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's a great conversation. great podcast episode, and I look forward to the next one if you'll join me again, because I have still plenty more questions